A chance encounter. The November wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it the sharp bite of the oncoming winter. Sam Turner hunched over the steering wheel of his old sedan, rubbing his hands together to chase away the cold. The heater barely worked, sputtering warm air in fits and starts, but he had learned to live with life's small inconveniences. The grocery bags in his backseat rustled with every bump in the road, the weight of canned goods and discount bread shifting as he took a slow turn. It was his usual Friday night routine: finish work at the auto shop, grab some groceries, and return to an empty house. The routine had once been comforting, predictable. But in recent years, it had become a reminder of how alone he truly was. The radio hummed softly in the background, a classical piece he couldn't quite name filling the silence. His mind drifted, wandering through memories of a time when life had felt fuller. He had never married, never had children. Work had been his companion, and now, in retirement, solitude was his only constant. A wrong turn brought him under a highway overpass. The dimly lit stretch of road was unfamiliar. The streetlights flickered, their yellow glow barely pushing back the encroaching darkness. Graffiti-covered walls, broken glass, and abandoned shopping carts lined the sidewalks, a place forgotten by the world. Sam slowed at a stop sign, gripping the wheel tighter. The eerie silence of the place unsettled him, but just as he was about to step on the gas, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Two small figures huddled together near a crumbling concrete pillar. His breath caught. Children. They were barely visible, blending into the shadows, their bodies curled against the cold. A thin, tattered blanket was wrapped around them, doing little to shield them from the biting wind. Sam's heart twisted. He hesitated, glancing at the clock on the dashboard. It was late. He could keep driving, pretend he hadn't seen them. But something deep inside him, something stronger than reason, told him to stop. Rolling down his window, he called out, "Hey there, you two okay?" The taller of the two shifted slightly, revealing a pair of wide, fearful eyes. A boy. He looked to be around 10, maybe 11. His sister, identical to him in every way, clung to his side, her small fingers clutching the fabric of his torn hoodie. They didn't answer. Sam's gut tightened. He had seen homeless adults before, too many of them in this city, but children. Alone. He reached into the passenger seat and grabbed a brown paper bag. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated, then nodded. Sam opened the car door, the cold air biting at his face as he stepped out. He approached cautiously, not wanting to scare them off. He set the bag down a few feet away and backed up. The boy hesitated only for a second before darting forward, snatching the bag and retreating. He opened it and pulled out a sandwich Sam had grabbed from the store deli. Without a word, he handed half to his sister. Sam watched as they devoured the food, their thin fingers trembling. "Where are your parents?" he asked softly. The boy stiffened. His sister lowered her gaze. Sam sighed. He had expected silence. "Do you have anywhere to go?" Again, silence. The wind howled through the underpass, carrying with it the distant wail of a siren. The city moved on, uncaring of the two children shivering in the cold. Sam rubbed the back of his neck. He wasn't a rich man. He wasn't even sure he was the right person to help. But the thought of leaving them here, alone in the dark, gnawed at him. "Listen," he said carefully, "I have a place not too far from here. It's warm. There's food." He met the boy's wary gaze. "I won't ask anything from you, just a place to rest for the night." The boy clutched his sister's hand. "We don't know you," the girl whispered, her voice barely above the wind. Sam nodded. "That's fair." He crouched down, leveling his gaze with theirs. "My name's Sam Turner. I used to fix cars for a living. Now I just try to get by." He gestured toward his old sit-in. "It's not much, but I've got a couch, a guest room, and hot chocolate." The girl's eyes flickered with something. Hope, maybe. The boy still looked skeptical. Sam sighed, standing up. I won't force you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded $20 bill, setting it on the ground near them. "If you don't want to come, get yourselves something warm, okay?" He turned and walked back to his car, his heart heavy. He had tried. That was all he could do. Sliding into the driver's seat, he started the engine, the rumble breaking the silence. He put the car into drive and began to pull away. A knock on the passenger side window stopped him. He turned to see the boy standing there, his sister right behind him. Sam reached over and unlocked the door. The boy hesitated only for a second before opening it. He helped his sister climb in first, then slid in beside her. They sat stiffly, their bodies tense. Sam turned up the heater. "Seat belts," he said gently. The girl fumbled with hers. The boy helped her, his hands still shaking. As Sam pulled onto the road, he glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "What are your names?" he asked. The boy hesitated before finally answering, his voice quiet. "Daniel," he said. "And this is Maya." Sam smiled softly. "Well, Daniel and Maya, let's get you home." The girl whispered something under her breath. Sam turned his head slightly. What was that? She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Sam's throat tightened. He gave a small nod and kept driving, the weight of what he had just done settling deep in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this simple act of kindness, would change all of their lives forever. And one day, 20 years from now, Daniel and Maya would repay him in a way he never could have imagined. A home for two. The car ride home was quiet, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Sam kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching the two children sitting stiffly in the back seat. They were still shivering, their frail bodies wrapped in their thin clothes. Maya clung to Daniel's arm, her small fingers gripping his sleeve as if he was the only thing keeping her anchored. The heater whined, struggling to push out warm air, but Sam knew it wasn't enough to melt away the fear etched into their young faces. "You kids like music?" he asked, breaking the silence. Neither of them answered, but Maya's eyes flickered to the old radio on the dashboard. Sam reached out and turned the dial, the static crackling before settling on a jazz station. The slow hum of a saxophone filled the car. Daniel didn't react, but Maya leaned her head against the window, her breathing steadying. Sam focused on the road. The drive wasn't long, just a few miles to the quiet neighborhood where his house sat on the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, just a modest single-story home with peeling white paint and a small yard. It had been his parents' house once, passed down to him after they were gone. He pulled into the driveway and shut off the engine. Turning in his seat, he met Daniel's wary gaze. "No pressure, kid. If you don't feel safe, you can leave whenever you want." Daniel said nothing. Maya looked up at her brother, waiting for his decision. After a moment, Daniel gave the smallest of nods. Sam exhaled. "All right then. Let's get you two inside." He stepped out, grabbing a couple of grocery bags from the back seat before leading them to the front door. Inside, the house was warm, warmer than the car. The scent of old wood and faintly lingering motor oil from his garage filled the space. The living room was simple: a worn-out couch, a coffee table cluttered with books, and a TV that looked like it belonged in another decade. Daniel and Maya hovered by the doorway, their small frames barely making the sound. "Shoes off," Sam said casually, toning off his own boots. Maya immediately obeyed, untying her frayed sneakers and placing them neatly beside the door. Daniel hesitated before following suit. Sam nodded toward the couch. "Make yourselves comfortable. I'll get you something warm to eat." The twins sat down stiffly, their eyes darting around the room as if memorizing the exits. Sam moved to the kitchen, his hands working on autopilot. He grabbed a pot, poured in some milk, and set it on the stove. He had promised them hot chocolate, and he wasn't about to break his word. A few minutes later, He walked back in with 2 steaming mugs and a plate of peanut butter sandwiches. Maya's eyes widened at the sight of the food, her small hands immediately wrapping around the warm cup. "Careful, it's hot," Sam warned. She blew on it gently before taking a small sip. Her face lit up. Daniel, on the other hand, didn't touch his. He simply stared at Sam, his dark eyes guarded. "You're waiting for me to do something bad, aren't you?" Sam asked, settling into his recliner. Daniel tensed but didn't deny it. Sam sighed, leaning back. "I get it. You've been through a lot. People probably let you down." Daniel's jaw tightened. "But here's the thing," Sam continued. "I don't want anything from you. No tricks, no hidden motives. Just a warm place for you to sleep tonight." Silence. Maya nibbled on her sandwich, watching the exchange carefully. After a long pause, Daniel finally picked up his cup and took a sip. He didn't speak, but he didn't refuse the kindness either. It was a start. A place to rest. That night, Sam set up the guest room. It was small, just a twin bed and an old dresser, but it was more than the cold pavement they had been sleeping on. "You can take the bed," he said, looking at the twins. "Both of you." Daniel frowned. "We don't share beds." Sam scratched his head. "All right. Well, the couch is open too." Maya hesitated, glancing at her brother before speaking. "Where will you sleep?" Sam chuckled. "In my own bed. Where else?" She looked relieved. Daniel didn't move until Maya climbed onto the mattress, curling up under the heavy quilt. Only then did he step toward the couch, sitting stiffly at the edge, as if waiting for someone to yank it away from him. Sam sighed. "I'll leave the hallway light on. If you need anything, my room's down the hall." He started to leave, but before he could, Maya's small voice stopped him. "Why are you doing this?" Sam turned back. She wasn't scared anymore, just confused. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I know what it's like to be alone," he admitted, "and nobody deserves that. Not kids. Not anyone." Maya stared at him for a long moment before finally whispering, "Good night, Mr. Turner." Something in Sam's chest tightened. "Good night, kid." Morning light. The next morning, Sam woke to the smell of something burning. Panic shot through him as he threw off his covers and rushed to the kitchen. He skidded to a stop in the doorway. Maya stood by the stove, frantically fanning a pan filled with what used to be eggs. Daniel was beside her, holding a wooden spoon like it was a weapon against disaster. What in the world? Maya spun around, her face red with embarrassment. "We were trying to make breakfast." Daniel crossed his arms. "We thought we should do something to thank you." Sam blinked. Then, to their surprise, he burst out laughing. It had been years since he had woken up to a house that wasn't completely silent. Years since someone had wanted to do something for him. He shook his head, stepping forward. "Well, let's start over before we burn the place down, yeah." Maya giggled. Daniel sighed but handed him the spoon. As they worked together, flipping pancakes and scrambling new eggs, something shifted. The house wasn't just his anymore. It was becoming theirs too. A new beginning. Over the next few weeks, the twins settled in. Maya chattered more, asking questions about the house, the old photographs on the wall, the radio station Sam liked. Daniel remained cautious, but his walls slowly cracked. He helped Sam fix a leaky pipe, shoveled the snow without being asked, and even laughed once when Sam slipped on ice and swore like a sailor. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Sam put down his fork. "You don't have to stay," he said, "but if you want to, the door's open." Daniel and Maya exchanged a glance. For the first time, Daniel's expression softened. "We'd like that," he murmured. And just like that, Sam Turner, a man who thought his life was over, found himself with a new family. He had taken in 2 strangers, expecting nothing in return. But fate had other plans. And one day, these 2 children would return that kindness in a way that would shake the world. But for now, They were just a man and two kids, sitting at a worn-out dinner table, sharing a meal. And for the first time in years, Sam felt truly home. Building a future, winter turned to spring, and spring melted into summer. The cold, quiet house that once echoed with loneliness had become something different, lively, warm, filled with laughter and the occasional bickering of siblings. Sam never realized how much his life had been missing until Daniel and Maya became a part of it. The twins settled into a routine, slowly letting their guard down. In the mornings, Sam would wake to the smell of Maya experimenting in the kitchen. Sometimes a disaster, sometimes a success. Daniel, though reserved, had taken an interest in fixing things, following Sam into the garage to learn about tools and engines. Despite the comfort they found in their new home, Sam knew the real world wouldn't be kind to them unless they were prepared. And so, he made sure they were. The first challenge: education. The first hurdle was school. The twins hadn't been in a proper classroom for years, and it showed. When Sam first mentioned enrolling them, Daniel immediately refused. "We're not going," he said firmly, crossing his arms. Maya looked torn, but she didn't argue with her brother. Sam leaned back in his chair, studying them. "Why not?" Daniel looked away. "Because school isn't for kids like us. We're too far behind." Sam exhaled. He understood the fear of failure, but he also knew what happened to kids who slipped through the cracks. "Listen, son," he said gently, "I'm not asking you to be the best. I'm asking you to try." Daniel hesitated. Maya looked up at her brother. "Maybe we could just see what it's like," she suggested softly. Sam watched as Daniel clenched his jaw, the conflict clear in his eyes. "I'm not gonna let you fail," Sam said, "but I won't force you either. The choice is yours." Daniel was quiet for a long time. Finally, he sighed. "Fine," he muttered, "but if it's terrible, we're out." Sam smiled. "Deal." The struggle of starting over. The first few months of school were rough. The twins were smart, smarter than they gave themselves credit for, but years of instability had left gaps in their education. They struggled to keep up, constantly frustrated. Daniel had the toughest time. He hated feeling behind, hated sitting in a classroom full of kids who had never spent a night sleeping under a bridge. He got into fights, snapped at teachers, and nearly got suspended twice. One evening, Sam found him sitting on the porch, staring at the sunset with a scowl on his face. "You want to talk about it?" Sam asked, sitting down beside him. Daniel didn't answer right away. He kicked at a loose pebble, watching it tumble down the steps. "I hate it," he muttered. Sam nodded. "I figured." Daniel glanced at him, expecting some long-winded lecture. But Sam just sat there, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "It's not just the schoolwork," he admitted. "It's the kids. They don't get it. They act like I don't belong there." Sam sighed. "They don't know your story." Daniel clenched his fists. "I don't want their pity." "No," Sam agreed. "But you want a future, don't you?" Daniel didn't respond, but his silence told Sam enough. "You've got a choice, son," Sam said finally. "You can let them win. Let them make you believe you don't belong. Or you can prove them wrong." Daniel exhaled sharply. "And how am I supposed to do that?" Sam patted his shoulder. "By getting up tomorrow and doing it all over again." The next day, Daniel went back. He didn't like it. He still got frustrated, but he kept going. And that was enough. Finding strength. Maya, on the other hand, flourished in school. She devoured books, asked endless questions, and even started helping Daniel with his homework, whether he wanted her help or not. She found joy in learning, in solving problems, in understanding things she never had the chance to before. One evening, as Sam cooked dinner, she sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a book on anatomy. "I think I'd want to be a doctor," she blurted out. Sam nearly dropped the spatula. "A doctor," he repeated. She nodded eagerly. Yeah, I know it's hard, and I'd have to study a lot, but I want to help people. The way you helped us. Sam felt a lump rise in his throat. He cleared it quickly, nodding. Well then, he said, flipping the pancakes, we better make sure you have everything you need. Maya beamed. Teaching responsibility. While Maya found her passion in books, Daniel found his in working with his hands. Sam noticed it one afternoon when he found Daniel in the garage, staring at the old rusted truck Sam had been meaning to fix for years. Think it'll ever run again? Daniel asked. Sam chuckled. Not unless someone's crazy enough to put in the work. Daniel smirked. Maybe I am. And so they worked side by side, Sam teaching him everything he knew about engines, wires, and oil changes. For the first time, Daniel had something he was good at, something that didn't require textbooks or test scores. And slowly, the anger he carried began to fade. The moment that changed everything. Years passed, and the twins grew. They stopped being just two kids who needed help. They became family. Then, one day, something happened that reminded Sam just how much they had come to mean to him. It was a stormy evening when Sam collapsed. One minute he was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, and the next, everything went black. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed, his vision blurry. The beeping of monitors filled the room. And beside him, gripping his hand tightly, were Daniel and Maya. Maya had tears in her eyes. Daniel's face was pale with worry. What happened? Sam croaked. You had a heart attack, Maya whispered. The doctor said if we hadn't gotten you here in time. Her voice broke. Daniel clenched his jaw. You scared us, old man. Sam chuckled weakly. Guess I'm not invincible after all. Maya wiped her eyes. The doctor said you need to take it easy. No more heavy lifting. No more stress. Sam exhaled. Guess that means no more fixing trucks. Daniel smirked. Don't worry. I got it covered. Sam looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't the scared, broken kids he had taken in all those years ago. They were strong, capable. His kids. And at that moment, he realized something else. They didn't need him anymore. But they still wanted him. And that meant everything. As he drifted back to sleep, he heard Maya whisper, We're not letting you go anywhere, Mr. Turner. And for the first time in a long, long time, Sam believed it. Life's cruel turns. Sam Turner had always believed in the power of hard work, in the idea that if you gave everything you had, life would reward you in the end. But as he lay in his hospital bed, staring at the fluorescent lights above, he began to wonder if life had decided he had given enough. The heart attack had shaken him. He wasn't a young man anymore. His body was failing him. And for the first time, he truly felt it. The doctors were clear. He needed to slow down, to rest, to take his medication and avoid stress. Easier said than done. Because while Sam was lying in that bed, time kept moving. The bills kept coming. The world didn't stop just because he needed it to. But what surprised him the most, what left him completely speechless, was how Daniel and Maya stepped up. They didn't just visit him every day at the hospital. They took charge. And Sam, a man who had always carried the weight of the world on his own shoulders, found himself in the unfamiliar position of being taken care of. A new kind of strength. When Sam was discharged, he expected to return home to his old routine. He expected to go back to fixing cars in his garage, cooking his own meals, and figuring out how to scrape by on his dwindling savings. But Daniel and Maya had other plans. The moment he stepped through the front door, he knew something was different. For one, the house smelled cleaner than usual, like fresh lemon and soap, not the faint, lingering scent of motor oil. The cluttered coffee table had been cleared, the pile of unopened mail neatly stacked on the counter. The old recliner where he usually collapsed after a long day had a new blanket draped over it, folded perfectly. He turned, raising an eyebrow. Okay, What's going on? Maya stepped forward, her arms crossed. We're taking over, Mr. Turner. Daniel smirked, leaning against the kitchen counter. And there's nothing you can do about it. Sam frowned. What do you mean, taking over? Maya huffed. You almost died, Sam. You can't just go back to life like nothing happened. Daniel nodded. We've got it covered. You rest. We'll handle the rest. Sam opened his mouth to argue, but before he could get a word out, Maya pulled out a folder and dropped it on the kitchen table. What's this? He asked. Your medical bills, she said. We're paying them. Sam's heart skipped a beat. No way. Absolutely not. Maya crossed her arms. Too late. I already spoke to the billing department. Sam's jaw tightened. He hated this, hated the idea of them spending their hard-earned money on him. But before he could protest, Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. You took care of us, he said. Now let us take care of you. Sam swallowed hard. He had never asked for anything in return, never expected anything. But looking at them now, grown, successful, standing in his kitchen like they belonged there, he realized that this was what family was. Not an obligation, not a debt, just love. Struggles and sacrifices. Sam tried to adjust to this new reality, but it wasn't easy. He had always been independent, always relied on his own two hands to fix his problems. But now his body was betraying him. He tired easily, his joints ached, and the doctor's warnings echoed in his head every time he tried to do too much. Daniel refused to let him work on cars anymore. Instead, he took over the garage, fixing up vehicles in his free time. What had started as a hobby turned into a side business, and soon, customers were coming to him instead of the big repair shops in town. Maya, meanwhile, juggled her medical studies while managing everything at home. She organized Sam's medication schedule, made sure he was eating properly, and even convinced him to start light exercise to strengthen his heart. They didn't just take care of him, they fought for him. And Sam, for the first time in his life, let someone else carry the weight. An unseen battle. But life, as always, had more challenges in store. The hospital bills weren't the only financial burden. Sam had been struggling long before his heart attack, and now that he couldn't work, the situation worsened. One evening, Maya found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a pile of overdue notices. She frowned. Sam. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't know how I'm gonna keep this house, kid. Maya's stomach twisted. What do you mean? I mean I don't have enough to cover the mortgage, he admitted. Even if I sell the truck and the tools, it won't be enough. Maya's hands clenched. We'll figure something out. But Sam shook his head. I don't want you two worrying about this. You have your own lives. Maya sat down beside him. Our lives wouldn't even exist the way they do if it weren't for you. Sam exhaled, but before he could argue, she stood up. Let me handle it. Sam watched as she left the room, his heart heavy. He had spent his life trying to protect them, to give them stability. And now, they were the ones protecting him. A sacrifice made in love. A week later, something happened that left Sam speechless. He woke up to the sound of Daniel moving furniture in the living room. Frowning, he shuffled out of bed, still groggy. What's going on? Daniel looked up. Packing. Packing what? Daniel hesitated. The house is paid off. Sam's heart stopped. What? Maya walked in, wiping her hands on a towel. We paid off the mortgage, Sam. Sam felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. How? He asked hoarsely. Maya bit her lip. I sold my car. Sam's breath hitched. Maya. And I used some of my scholarship money, she admitted. Not all of it, just enough to cover what we needed. Sam turned to Daniel, who was avoiding his gaze. Daniel cleared his throat. I sold the truck. Sam's chest tightened. You love that truck. Daniel shrugged, forcing a smirk. Yeah. Well, I love you more. The words hit Sam like a punch to the gut. His knees wobbled, and he collapsed onto the couch. He felt his throat tighten, emotions swelling so fiercely that he could barely breathe. They had given up everything for him. Tears burned his eyes. "You shouldn't have." Maya kneeled in front of him, taking his hands. "We wanted to," she whispered. "You gave us everything, Sam, and now it's our turn." Sam shook his head, overcome with emotion. "I don't deserve this." Daniel scoffed. "Yeah, you do." Maya squeezed his hands. "This house, this isn't just yours, Sam. It's ours. It's home. And we're never losing it." Sam couldn't stop the tears from slipping down his face. He had spent his whole life thinking he was alone. But now, for the first time, he realized he never would be again. A love repaid. That night, as Sam sat on the porch watching the sunset, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had taken in 2 lost kids, expecting nothing in return. And now, 20 years later, they had given him something he never dared to dream of. A family. A future. And the greatest repayment of all, love. A debt repaid. The seasons turned once again, painting the town in golden hues of autumn. The crisp air carried the scent of burning wood and freshly fallen leaves, a reminder that another year was slipping by. But for Sam Turner, life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The house, the one he had feared losing, was still his. Not because of anything he had done, but because of 2 kids he had once found shivering under a bridge. 2 kids who had grown into adults capable of not just surviving, but thriving. Every time Sam walked through the front door, he felt it. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was their home. The walls held more than just memories. They held love, sacrifice, and the undeniable proof that family wasn't just about blood. And yet, despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still the one holding them back. A father's guilt. One evening, Sam sat in his old recliner, watching as Maya flipped through her medical textbooks at the kitchen table. Daniel was outside in the garage, tinkering with an engine, his usual escape after a long day. Sam exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He couldn't ignore the weight pressing down on his chest any longer. "Maya," he said finally, his voice rough. She looked up, her dark eyes filled with warmth. "Yeah." He hesitated. "I need you to stop worrying about me." Her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Sam leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You and Daniel, you gave up too much. The house, the money, your car, hell, your scholarship funds. I can't let you keep sacrificing for me." Maya's expression softened. She closed her textbook and stood up, moving to sit on the armrest of his chair. "We didn't sacrifice anything, Sam," she said gently. "We chose this." He shook his head. "But your future." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "My future is still happening. I'm still in med school. I'm still becoming a doctor. And Daniel, he's doing what he loves." Sam exhaled, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. I don't want to be a burden to you too." Maya frowned. "You're not a burden. You raised us." Sam let out a dry chuckle. "I don't know if I'd call it that. I just gave you a place to stay." She smiled softly. "Yeah, but you also gave us something more important." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Maya's voice was almost a whisper. "A father." Sam's heart clenched. Maya wasn't one for sentimental speeches, but when she spoke, she meant every word. He looked into her eyes and saw it, saw the unwavering love and gratitude she carried for him. He had never been anyone's father before, but to them he was. And that meant everything. A life-changing surprise. A few weeks later, Sam's quiet routine was interrupted once again. He had just finished breakfast when Daniel and Maya burst through the front door, excitement radiating off them. Daniel tossed a set of car keys onto the kitchen table. "You're coming with us." Sam blinked. "Where?" Maya grinned. "Just get dressed, old man. It's a surprise." Sam groaned, but he obeyed. He threw on his coat, grumbling the entire way to the car. As they drove, he tried to get answers, but neither of them would say a word. "Y'all aren't taking me to a nursing home, are you?" he choked. Maya snorted. "Not yet." Daniel just smirked. "Trust us." After half an hour, they pulled up to an unfamiliar street. It was a quiet neighborhood, lined with newly built homes. Sam frowned. "What is this place?" Daniel parked the car and turned in his seat. "You'll see." They led him toward one of the houses, a beautiful single-story home with a wraparound porch, the kind of place Sam had only dreamed about. And then Maya pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to him. Sam unfolded it. His hand shook as he read the words. "Deed of ownership." His name was on it. His heart nearly stopped. What is this?" Maya beamed. "It's your new house." Sam's vision blurred. "What?" Daniel grinned. "It's paid for. No mortgage. No bills hanging over your head. Just yours." Sam stumbled back, gripping the railing for support. I don't understand." "How did you?" Maya reached for his hand. "We've been saving, Sam, for years, ever since we got our first jobs." Daniel nodded. "You gave us everything. We wanted to give something back." Sam felt his knees go weak. He couldn't even form the words. Maya squeezed his hand. "You took in 2 homeless kids and gave them a life. You never expected anything in return, but we wanted to do this for you." Sam wiped at his eyes, his breath shaking. "I don't deserve this." Daniel scoffed. "Yeah, you do." Maya smirked. "And before you start arguing, we already moved all your stuff." Sam blinked. "You what?" Daniel laughed. "Yeah, while you were sleeping last night. It's all in there. Your recliner, your tools, even that ugly lamp you refused to throw out." Sam let out a choked laugh. Maya nudged him toward the front door. "Come on, let's go inside." Still stunned, he let them lead him into the house. The moment he stepped through the front door, warmth flooded through him. It wasn't just a house, it was home. His photos were on the walls. His old recliner sat by the window, positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon sun. His tools were neatly arranged in the garage, just like he liked them. Everything was exactly how it should be. Except now, it was his. No banks, no debt, no fear of losing it. Sam turned to look at them, his heart pounding. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. Maya smiled. "Just say you'll stay." Sam swallowed hard. He looked around again, taking in every inch of the space. The kitchen, where he could already imagine cooking breakfast. The backyard, where he could sit and watch the sunset. And the 2 people standing before him, the kids who had become his entire world. Tears burned in his eyes. "I'll stay," he whispered. Maya hugged him first, burying her face in his chest. Daniel clapped a hand on his back, squeezing his shoulder. And for the first time in his life, Sam Turner, an old mechanic who had once lived in solitude, realized something. He wasn't alone. He never would be again. The greatest reward. That night, Sam sat on the porch of his own home, sipping a cup of coffee. The stars stretched across the sky, twinkling against the vast darkness. Inside, he could hear Maya laughing at something Daniel had said. The sound filled the house, rich and warm. Sam closed his eyes. He had never expected anything in return when he took those kids in. But they had repaid him in a way he never could have imagined. Not with money, not with a house, but with love. And in the end, that was the greatest reward of all. The greatest reward. The years had been kind to Sam Turner in ways he never expected. He sat on the wraparound porch of his new home, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The autumn air carried the scent of burning wood from a distant fireplace, mixing with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Inside, he could hear Maya's laughter, light and carefree, as she teased Daniel about something. He smiled to himself. Once upon a time, he had been a lonely man in an empty house, resigned to fading into obscurity. But fate had other plans. Daniel and Maya had been a miracle he hadn't seen coming. And now, even after everything they had done for him, they still weren't finished. Because tonight, they had one more surprise. A celebration of family. "Sam, get in here," Maya called from inside the house. "You're not getting out of this one." Sam chuckled, taking one last sip of his coffee before standing up. His joints protested, but he ignored them. He wasn't as strong as he used to be, but that didn't matter. He stepped inside and was immediately hit with the smell of something delicious cooking. The kitchen table was covered with food: homemade cornbread, mashed potatoes, greens, and a roast big enough to feed a small army. "You two act like I'm some kind of king," he muttered, shaking his head. "You are," Daniel said with a grin, handing him a plate. "Now eat." Sam took the plate but eyed them suspiciously. "All right, what's the occasion?" Maya and Daniel exchanged a look. Sam's brow furrowed. "You are up to something." Maya smirked. "Just eat first." Sam rolled his eyes but sat down. He wasn't about to turn down a meal like this. Dinner passed with easy conversation, laughter and stories about Maya's medical residency and Daniel's growing business. Sam listened, content, taking it all in. He never got tired of hearing about their successes. And then, just as he was about to clear his plate, Maya cleared her throat. "Okay," she said, sitting up straighter. "Now for the real reason we made this big dinner." Sam arched an eyebrow. "Oh boy. Should I be worried?" Daniel smirked. "Nah, just sit tight." Maya reached under the table and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across to Sam. He frowned, picking it up slowly. "What's this?" "Open it," Maya urged. Sam hesitated, his fingers carefully peeling the envelope open. Inside was a thick stack of documents. The first page made his breath hitch. Sam Turner Foundation. Official charter document. His head snapped up. "What is this?" Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "It's yours." Sam's heart pounded. "Mine." Maya nodded, her smile soft. "It's a foundation in your name, Sam, to help kids like us, kids who have nowhere to go." Sam stared at them. You did this." Daniel smirked. "We had some help, but yeah." Maya reached for his hand. "You gave us everything when we had nothing, Sam. Now we want to do the same for others." Sam swallowed hard, his vision blurring. I don't even know what to say." Daniel chuckled. "Well, that's a first." Sam laughed weakly, shaking his head. "You kids." He trailed off, looking down at the papers again. "This is bigger than anything I ever imagined. We wanted to make sure your kindness keeps going," Maya said. "We've already got a building downtown, a safe house for homeless kids and teens, a place where they can get food, shelter, and resources to get back on their feet." Daniel grinned. "We even named one of the dorm wings after you, Turner Hall." Sam choked on a laugh, rubbing at his eyes. "You two are unreal." Maya squeezed his hand. "You deserve this, Sam." For a long moment, Sam couldn't speak. His entire life, he had given without expecting anything in return. And yet, here they were, his kids, his family, continuing his legacy in a way he never could have imagined. He finally exhaled, looking between them. "I'm proud of you," he said hoarsely. Daniel grinned. "We know." Maya nudged his shoulder. "Now come on, old man. We got one more surprise." Sam shook his head, laughing. "If it's another house, I'm walking out." Maya laughed. "No, it's not another house." Daniel stood, grabbing a small box from the counter. "Here." Sam took it, his hands trembling slightly. He opened the lid, and inside was a brand new set of keys. His brow furrowed. Okay, what am I looking at? Maya grinned. Your new truck. Sam's eyes widened. No way. Daniel smirked. You thought we'd let you go truckless forever. We rebuilt one just for you. Sam was speechless. Maya grabbed his hand. Come on, let's go see it. Still in shock, Sam let them lead him outside. Parked in the driveway was a beautifully restored truck, one that looked just like his old one, but better. Sam ran a hand over the hood, his throat tightening. It's perfect, he whispered. Daniel leaned against the side. Damn right it is. Sam turned to them, shaking his head. I don't deserve all this. Maya's expression softened. Yes, you do. Daniel nodded. Every bit of it. Sam took a deep breath, staring at them, the two people he had once picked up from the cold streets, now standing before him. Successful, strong, family. He reached out, pulling them both into a hug. For a moment, they just stood there, wrapped in warmth, in gratitude, in love. I love you too, Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. We love you too, Maya whispered. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, even when you're stubborn. Sam laughed. I don't know what I did to deserve you too. Maya pulled back, wiping at her eyes. You saved us, Sam. Daniel nodded. And now we're just returning the favor. Sam looked up at the sky, exhaling deeply. This was more than he had ever dreamed of. More than he had ever needed. Not the house, not the foundation, but them. His kids, his family. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like just a man who had done a good deed. He felt whole. Epilogue. A legacy that lives on. Years later, Sam stood in front of the Turner Foundation, watching as children ran through the halls, their laughter echoing through the air. Somewhere inside, Maya was running a health clinic for those who couldn't afford medical care. In another room, Daniel was teaching young kids how to fix things, passing down the same skills Sam had once taught him. And in every corner of this place, Sam saw his legacy. Not in his name, not in the plaque on the wall, but in the lives he had touched. A hand squeezed his shoulder. You ready to head home, old man? Daniel asked. Sam smiled, nodding. Yeah, let's go home. As they walked out, Sam took one last look at the building. This was his repayment. Not money, not fame, but love. And that was the greatest reward of all.